Picture this. You're deep in the mountains of Peru, 3,000 years ago. You've walked for days to reach a temple carved into a hillside. Priests lead you underground, into a maze of stone corridors so narrow you have to turn sideways. The torches go out. You're standing in total darkness. And then, the building screams. Not a metaphor. Not a myth. A real, physical roar, low, deep, otherworldly, rolling through the passageways from every direction at once, as if the mountain itself has come alive. You didn't imagine it. The people who built this place designed it to do exactly that. Welcome back to History Harbor. Today we're going underground, into one of archaeology's strangest discoveries, a temple engineered not just to be seen, but to be heard, a building that functioned like a machine for producing fear, awe, and altered states of consciousness. And the deeper researchers dig into it, the more it looks like these ancient builders understood acoustic science that we're only now catching up to. The place, Chavín de Huántar. The site is called Chavín de Huántar, tucked high in the Peruvian Andes, roughly 10,000 feet above sea level. It predates the Inca Empire by more than 2,000 years, built during what archaeologists call the Andean formative period, somewhere around 1200 to 500 BCE. From the outside, it doesn't look like much of a mystery. Terraced stone platforms, plazas, a scatter of carved monoliths. But beneath the surface literally is where things get strange. Chavin is riddled with a network of underground galleries, narrow stone corridors, tiny chambers, ventilation shafts, and drainage canals, all threading through the interior like the inside of a lung. For decades, archaeologists assumed these underground spaces were storage rooms, or tombs, or simply structural. It took a team led by archaeologist John Rick, working with acoustics researchers from Stanford, to realize something remarkable. This labyrinth wasn't just built to hold things. It was built to move sound. The instrument, Pututu. Inside those galleries, archaeologists found something unexpected: large marine conch shells, some over a foot long, carved and painted, tucked into niches deep within the stone. These are called Pututu ceremonial shell trumpets, carved from a species of sea snail that doesn't even live near Chavin. That alone tells you something. Whoever brought these shells inland, over mountains, from a coastline hundreds of miles away, considered them precious enough to be worth the journey. When researchers recovered intact Pututus and carefully played them inside the galleries, the results were startling. A Pututu doesn't sound like a trumpet. It sounds like something between a foghorn and an animal call, a deep, buzzing drone that doesn't fade politely. It smears. It bends. And once that sound entered Chavin's stone corridors, the architecture took over. The narrow galleries acted like resonating chambers, amplifying certain frequencies and letting them build on each other. When multiple Pututus were sounded together, slightly out of tune with one another, they produced what acousticians call a beating effect, a pulsing, throbbing wave of sound that seems to move and breathe on its own. Stand in the wrong spot, in the pitch dark, with no idea where the sound is even coming from, and you can understand why the people of Chavin considered this space sacred, even supernatural. The architecture of fear. Here's where it gets even more deliberate. Researchers studying the corridors noticed something odd about their shape: a long central passageway that gradually narrows as it runs. That's not a construction accident. A tapering corridor acts like a horn in reverse. It's remarkably good at carrying a specific frequency, the low tone of a Pututu, outward and clear, while filtering out other sounds like footsteps or voices. In plain terms, the building was tuned. It was engineered so that the trumpet's call, and specifically that call, would travel from the hidden depths of the temple out into the plazas where crowds gathered, while ordinary human noise stayed muffled and swallowed by the stone. Whoever was inside, unseen, could reach out and touch an entire crowd with sound alone. And the sound design didn't stop at trumpets. Chavin also contains carved stone canals built with small drops and terraces, apparently designed so that running water would rush and cascade audibly through them, adding a layer of white noise, or even something closer to a hiss or a roar, to the underground soundscape. Combine that with drafts moving through ventilation shafts, and you get an environment that could produce sound almost by itself: wine moving through stone throats, water hissing over carved ledges, shell horns booming out of the dark. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that certain shafts and chambers may have been shaped to channel air in ways that created their own tones, essentially turning parts of the temple into a wind instrument. That piece is still debated, and it's important to be honest about that. Some of it is confirmed by direct acoustic testing, and some of it is an educated, evidence-supported hypothesis rather than settled fact. Why build a screaming temple? So why go to all this trouble? Why spend generations carving stone corridors specifically to weaponize sound? The likely answer sits at the intersection of religion and power. Chavin appears to have functioned as an oracle site, a place where a hidden priesthood, unseen in the depths of the temple, could deliver messages that felt like they came from the gods themselves, or from a monstrous supernatural being. The carved art all over the site backs this up: fanged, snarling figures with feline features, staring out from stone slabs, often shown holding the very Pututu shells found in the galleries. Now imagine being a pilgrim who has walked for days, fasted, maybe consumed a psychoactive plant like San Pedro cactus as part of the ritual. Researchers have found related iconography and residue suggesting this was part of Chavin's ceremonial practice. You're led into total darkness. Your senses are already unsteady. And then the mountain itself begins to growl. That's not an accident of engineering. That's theater, built directly into the architecture. The priests who controlled Chavin understood something that modern psychology confirms: disorientation, darkness, and unpredictable, directionless sound are among the most reliable ways to produce fear, vulnerability, and suggestibility in the human mind. They didn't need to understand neuroscience to understand the effect. They just needed centuries of trial and error, and the willingness to carve it into stone. Chavin isn't alone. Here's the part that makes this story bigger than one site in the Andes. Once researchers started asking, did ancient builders design for sound, they started finding the same pattern everywhere. At the Maya pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza, a hand clap at the base of the staircase produces an echo that some researchers describe as resembling the chirp of the quetzal bird, an animal considered sacred in Maya culture. At Newgrange in Ireland, a 5,000-year-old passage tomb, the stone chamber has resonant properties that dramatically amplify low drumming and chanting frequencies. And at the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta, an underground temple complex roughly the same age, a chamber known as the Oracle Room appears specifically shaped to amplify a deep male voice throughout the entire structure, while barely carrying a higher-pitched one. None of these cultures left behind a textbook on acoustic engineering. They left behind buildings. And in building after building, across completely unconnected civilizations on different continents, the same idea shows up again and again: shape the stone correctly, and you can shape how people feel. Modern science catches up. What makes Chavin such a landmark case is how rigorously it's been studied. Since the mid-2000s, researchers from Stanford Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics have partnered with archaeologists on site, placing microphones throughout the galleries, recording actual Pututu performances, and building computer models of how sound propagates through the structure. This isn't guesswork or wishful thinking. It's measured data, frequency response, reverberation time, the specific way that tapering corridor filters sound. The conclusion these researchers keep landing on is that the acoustic properties of Chavin's underground galleries are too consistent, too specific, and too aligned with the placement of the Pututus to be coincidental. In other words, this wasn't a temple that happened to sound impressive. It was a sound instrument that happened to be a temple. Closing reflection. There's something humbling in this story. We tend to imagine ancient people as separated from us by a wall of ignorance, waiting for modern science to arrive and explain the world to them. But the builders of Chavín de Huántar didn't need equations to understand standing waves, resonance, or psychoacoustic manipulation. They understood it through observation, experimentation, and an intimate relationship with stone, water, and shell. They built a machine for producing wonder. And 3,000 years later, it still works. Researchers who've stood in those galleries in the dark, hearing a Pututu bloom into a roar around them, describe an experience that's genuinely unsettling, even for people who know exactly how the trick is done. That's the real lesson buried in Chavin stone corridors. Technology isn't only about circuits and silicon. Sometimes it's about knowing, precisely, how to make a mountain scream. If this kind of hidden history is exactly what you come here for, make sure you're subscribed to History Harbor, because this is just one dock in a much bigger harbor of stories we haven't told yet. Drop a comment and let me know which ancient mystery should we dive into next. And if you enjoyed this journey into the past, give this video a like, it genuinely helps this channel grow. Thanks for exploring with me. I'll see you at the next port of call, right here on History Harbor.